So an art project that I was involved in just burned up on re-entry into the atmosphere of the Earth, which is pretty great. It's that's a long story. It's a long story. It starts 15 years ago. The Astrobotics company, which is a company here in Pittsburgh, affiliated with Carnegie Mellon University, built a robot lander to go to the surface of the moon and do a bunch of stuff. This is kind of part of the trend or the direction that NASA is looking to partner with private companies and kind of pay them to build the rockets and the stuff, and NASA then becomes kind of managerial, right? But the innovation in the building, whether this works or not, who knows? It didn't in this case, did it? Because it blew up. It didn't blow up. What happened is that as it was getting, it was out of the, it was on the way. There was a problem with the fuel, and they decided to program it so that it had a controlled burn, and I think ultimately whatever was left splashed down in the South Pacific. But it was supposed to go to the moon, land there, and then this robot was going to do things, prove it could do things. But it had these art payloads. This was one of them. The one that I was involved in was called the MoonArk, which I've talked about in other videos. I'll link to those. And the MoonArk was this object, still is. There were two of them made. Only one of them blew up. I don't know, it was big. Very beautiful structure of cylinders with a lot of different art and philosophy involved, etched on it, included in it. I had two pieces. There's 100, more than 100, 200 different artists involved with very elaborate construction. One of my contributions was the representation of a piece of music carved on the top disc. It's nice. And my friend and mentor Lowry Burgess, and I went to a radio telescope outside of Rotterdam, and that piece had been broadcast through that radio telescope to Andromeda, and that was awesome. But the MoonArk, it got burned up, and that feels like the right thing. That feels like the right thing to have happened. This project started way, way back. And I think at the time, Google had a prize, and you got points if the lander that you constructed included art, if it had a cultural weight. So that's how Lowry got involved with the robotics team. And so from the inception of the project, Lowry was involved and gradually built up a whole team at CMU to design and build this thing. And my involvement really was very peripheral with the project. Lowry and I had a long and very, very profound friendship. So I was very involved with Lowry. I'll be honest with them, I never quite gelled with the MoonArk. It was important to Lowry, and so it was important to me. And there was some interesting aspects to it. But the idea of an artifact that got deposited on the surface of the moon, in this case one of many in the payload, it just didn't it didn't captivate me. Now that it's been blown up, not blown up, now it's burned up, that captivates me. Because that's art. When we were first talking about it, one of the ideas I had was to create something, either a sculpture or write a score, like a music composed score or a poem or something, and have it on the launch pad so that when the rocket went off, this piece was incinerated. And to have it also be a piece that had never been seen or heard by anyone, a music composition that had never been played, or a poem that had never been read, and then it was incinerated. That was exciting. But no, they weren't going to have objects on the launch pad. Although there was this fantastic picture, different launch, but a stationary camera, I don't know, maybe a quarter mile from a launch pad, and it captures a frog who must have been close by, caught by the blast, and that poor frog is being incinerated. But you can see him sort of spread-eagled, frog in a rocket blast. That is liturgical. The immolated frog. So the MoonArk was on its way to the moon with a bunch of other junk, and it didn't make it. It got burned up. I think since then, some other private, was it called Odysseus? I can't remember. Just last week, I'm recording this on the 27th of February 2024. So I think last week, some other private company successfully landed on the moon, and it was all like, first American moon landing in 50 years or whatever. I think the idea is that then they can extract resources and build outside of the atmosphere, build in orbit, and get ready for Mars and the asteroids. So I'm all for geoengineering Mars, and whatever, but it's not going to be me that does that. My DNA is not going to be part of the space-bound humanity, which I do think is our future, right? But it's not going to be me. I think music can serve a couple of purposes. Like here on Earth, it can anticipate that experience, that extraterrestrial experience. It can anticipate. And I mean both extraterrestrial humanity on another planet, but also then the experiences that we are confronted with on other extraterrestrials, other life forms, other experiences that are just so bizarre that our current mind will crumble. Music, in particular music, but art, the aesthetic object, can anticipate that vector, confrontation of vectors of scale. Big, massive, ancient, distant, loud. We can anticipate that with music. And then when we are away, we can recapitulate our humanity as we become extraterrestrial. But that's not, like I said, that's not for me. The music needs to be liturgical, right? The art, and maybe the problem I had with the MoonArk is that it didn't resonate in my heart with that liturgical necessity. I think it had it, but it just wasn't mine. And you've heard me in other videos talk about the necessity, the essential navigational point for writing. Like, why write if it doesn't cultivate? So here's what happened when that object blew up, when the object burned up. I had well. So when it burned up, it was, for all intents and purposes, the 4th anniversary of Lowry's death, the week before. Lowry died on the 28th of January, 2020. It's now 2024. And the MoonArk was immolated the 19th or something like that, 20th of January. So, close enough. And my memories of Lowry, remember, he was, the most important person outside of my immediate family in my life for 20 years. Is that right? 20 years? I met him in... It's not quite 20 years. I met him in 2003 in in Noordwijk in Holland at a space arts conference. I was presenting a proposal, sort of a working proposal of a piece for didgeridoo and pulsar, where I used a radio telescope to capture the pulsar, brought it into my... This was before Eurorack. I was just thinking maybe a C-Sound software or something like that. Played my didgeridoo, combined the envelopes, and then sent out counterpoint in a separate radio telescope, but to the same pulsar. Nice. Lowry was talking about zero gravity and releasement and Heidegger. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was magical. And even then, 20 years ago, he was sort of the venerated father of space art. But I met him because we were all staying off campus, right? The event was at the European Space Agency campus in Noordwijk, and we were all staying in a couple of smaller hotels in the town. And then there was a coach that took us out after breakfast. So I sat down, and I was shy. I didn't have a lot of confidence in what I was doing. I didn't know anyone there. And this guy, big shock of white hair, black turtleneck, sat down, started talking, asked me about myself, said I was a composer. And before I knew it, we were talking about Messiaen and church bells, carillons, Stockhausen. He was completely fluent in all of this, as he was about everything. I mean, if you knew Lowry, he knew everything, and he really did. And he had it at immediate recall. The only other time I've ever heard anybody speak with such fluency about such a range of topics was on records of Terence McKenna speaking. So totally different psyche, but that degree of fluency and confidence. So we were talking on the bus as it went out, the coach, and realized that we lived a quarter mile away from each other here in Pittsburgh. He lives just down the street there. So we started meeting. I went to his studio Saturday afternoons, and so for 20 years, every Saturday, we would spend talking and drinking some bourbon, listening to music. It was just wonderful. We traveled a lot together. We traveled to Paris a couple of times. We had the trip to Rotterdam. We went out to California, to SETI, the SETI Institute. Went out to Mountain View a couple of times. And he moved down to Florida for the last few years of his life, and they were difficult. But when this MoonArk, when I heard that the MoonArk had incinerated, all I felt was this upwelling of this rose gold color, which is the color I've always associated with Lowry's spirit, or his aura, that sort of rose gold dawn. Hopefully I've dug up a photo and put it up here. And my relationship to my memories became uncomplicated. Just that. That's who Lowry is for me now. He's always been present. I think about him all the time. And that presence is part of the liturgical necessity for me, right? Like I run by now, when I think of a new project, I run it by that feeling. And if it doesn't cultivate that, I don't want to do it. I may still do it because I am still driven by ego and the desire to be recognized and to be, to be known. The desire for that is totally separate from achieving it. Yeah, right? But I want everything I do, whether it's writing or music, or essays, these videos, to pass that test. Does it cultivate this feeling of warmth and creativity and just pure beauty? Like the light of the rose dawn with gold flecks. Like Homer talking about dawn. That's what I want. And that's what I felt when I heard that this work of art that had occupied, an entire team of people at CMU, hundreds of artists like myself sort of peripherally involved. When I heard that had incinerated in the atmosphere, that was my first thought. I mean, I'm sorry for everybody who is disappointed that that object isn't on the surface of the moon, but it doesn't belong there anyway. It belonged where I saw it here. So it was at the Carnegie Museum here in Pittsburgh in the gemstone section, because it is quite it's quite a beautiful object. It was at the Pompidou in Paris, which is nice. But not the surface of it, and not as cargo on some fucking mining expedition. I don't know. Getting burned up in the atmosphere, that's good. That's releasement. I think that might be it. If you have any questions, let me know. This is a deep topic because I want to keep working on that. On that kind of work, like Lowry did. Lowry's great work is called the Quiet Axis. It's a series of environmental art, landscape art, space art. One of them was a payload on the space shuttle. It was a cube constructed with, there was a vacuum on the inside, but it had the waters from the 7 longest rivers. It had waters from the Dead Sea. And a poem etched on the outside. An incredible artifact. Another piece, he had a sculpture that was dropped from a helicopter into the ocean, deep ocean. He's on Easter Island. Like all of this, just absolutely visionary work. And I think for Lowry, maybe the MoonArk was a trigger point for that. I think. I never felt that. But those other pieces, the beautiful environmental gestures, and I say environmental meaning that the Earth itself is a participant in the work. The holographic lake buried holograms of lotus flowers buried in the desert in Afghanistan before the Taliban, before they blew up the Bamyan Buddhas. That's a miracle, and I'm astonished that I knew him, and it's a gift. It's a gift that the immolation of the MoonArk has freed these memories to the memories of my friend. So keep your wits about you.